Welcome back to Week in Horror, November 10th through November 16th. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Eugene, and I'm here with always Alex and JL. All right, so what have y'all been up to this past week?
Well, I've been watching some crazy shit. So, like crazy horror movies. I decided to go a little weird and check out some titles that the trailers were really, really just absurd. So I checked out this movie, Anti-Birth. And, this movie is so fucking twisted and wild. A stellar cast. It's got Natasha Lyonne from, Orange is the New Black and that Russian Doll series. I've loved her since Slums of Beverly Hills. And it's got Chloe Sevigny, everybody's favorite brown bunny. And... and so...
Sorry, the reference, keep going.
So, I was, and it got me thinking, watching this movie got me thinking about abstract horror, and, because this movie is so fucking absurd. It is gory, neon, pastel, sloppy craziness. Okay? And everybody in it is so committed to their parts, but it's like weird, druggy people that you can't really connect with, and strange pregnancies that go through a matter of days, and like skeletons jumping out of people's bodies and shit. It's really fucking strange. And so that movie was obviously, in the tamest term, abstract. And it got me thinking about another one about another film called Velvet Buzzsaw, which is currently on Netflix with Jake Gyllenhaal and a score of other individuals. But that's also a very, very abstract film, a very weird film. Just in its, not so much in its story, but more in the visual appeal of the film. So it's abstract in a different way. The presentation of the movie with its visuals, with its dynamic visuals and its color palettes, was also very, very abstract. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole of just abstract horror. And I started thinking, there's got to be a certain point where, even as a director, you have to see that when you make your film, even if your story is weird or strange, there's got to be a level of abstraction that pulls away from it. How much is too much? And like another one that came in mind was Lars von Trier's Antichrist, which I know that film, for any of our listeners who have seen it, that is a hard pill to swallow. That was a rough film. Certainly with a bit of abstract symbolism in it and strange things to make you think, but not nearly as extreme as a film like Anti-Birth. Okay, and kind of Velvet Buzzsaw somewhere in the middle. But at a point, does it take away? And I was just curious about that, and I wanted to ask you guys.
And I think it really depends on what kind of emotion that you're looking to invoke. And most films use stories and characterizations. You want characters you sympathize for and characters you like to go kind of get that emotion out of your audience, while others can maybe stem away from stories and go a little bit more on just pure visualization. A movie that came out just a few years ago was Kuso, which was directed by David Firth, who he did Salad Fingers on the internet, the cartoon, like weird, trippy cartoon stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so he started going into directing horror body comedies, and so he did Kuso, and it's just a collection of these short films that him and his buddies did, and there's no overarching story, there's no characters that really go through, it's just this twisted imagery. It involves a lot of body horror, a lot of bodily fluids of puking and like piss and shit and all this other kind of stuff. And then that's the end of the film. Like that's it, the end.
That literally sounds like Parenthood.
And then they grow up.
Kuso 2, Adolescence.
All sorts of weird smells and things coming out of holes.
So an extreme abstract horror like say Anti-Birth.
Okay. What part of the abstract are you talking about? Like the visualization, or are you talking about the storyline?
Oh, yeah, so you can go abstract in a variety of different ways. You can have an abstract story, which is just in the story itself, where it's in the narrative, or it's in the dialogue, where it's basically requires a great deal of applying an imagination in order to follow the narrative or to derive your own conclusions as to what is happening. I think a good example of that is like Blue Velvet, David Lynch, and in that respect, there are different takeaways from that movie as to Dennis Hopper's motivations and the dynamics between the lead characters. And so in that respect, that's abstract, but only from a narrative standpoint. Visually, it was very, very simple and was almost minimalistic in its approach. So with very, very diffuse lighting and camera shots that didn't vary wildly and camera distances that didn't vary wildly, typically close-ups and cowboys. And so that's abstracted from a narrative standpoint. Then you have something like Anti-Birth, which in reality, the storyline is really not that. The storyline's kind of absurd. Druggy girl passes out, wakes up with this pregnancy that's accelerating very fast, turns into a government conspiracy type thing. That's a pretty simplistic story, but the way it is divulged and the visual aspect of it is extremely abstract and very, very weird and lends itself to interpretation as to the characters, as to what is actually going on. And then, of course, a film like Antichrist, where it's a touch of both, where the narrative is simple but leaves something, but uses abstract ideologies in order to get the audience to think and engage. And then abstract visualizations like the deer with the stillborn fetus hanging out of it, or the fox in the trap that warns that the end is coming, or all the women walking up to the cabin in the final scene. These are all metaphorical imagery that you can take a lot from and drives it to a level of abstraction because it doesn't immediately speak to the narrative. You have to engage with it and go along with it. So I was curious as to what point, because where Antichrist drew me in and was a very painful movie and it was beautifully done, but ultimately a very rough ride. But that drew me in. That level of abstraction was almost minimal. Okay, like Blue Velvet, but something like Anti-Birth almost, despite the impressive performances of its leads, almost pushed me away.
Okay.
And see, you have a couple. There's one that came out in 1990 by some like little known filmmakers, a movie called Begotten.
Oh, I think I remember that.
It had, first of all, it has one of the creepiest posters ever, the black and white, and it looks like a woman up against, like, bleeding up against like a, it's just almost like a demon woman ghost thing up against like serious, like, fucked up wall. But I mean, that's starting to dive into it because there's no narrative at all, like, going through it. It's just pure imagery,
just
then,
like stream of consciousness.
Exactly.
So that's like super psychological. When you were talking about Antichrist and Anti-Birth and like looking into the two, because one of them is one type of psychological and one's the other, and so like Antichrist, it comes to mind. This movie I just watched is called Mother. I don't know if you've seen that at all.
Oh yes,
Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh
yeah, dude, and like I had, that was a recommendation, and so I watched it, and I got halfway through the movie, and I was so confused, and I was like, okay, is this supposed to not make sense? Because none of it, I feel like, I'm not even going to go way into it because this one's still pretty new. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. But it's super minimal. It's in a house. It's all the same. She's like trying to fix this house, but it's real, just like flat colors. Everything's real, just natural. But like, you have no idea what's going on the entire movie. It could be one thing, it could be another, it could be a third and fourth thing. And then you think like, no, it's definitely, this is all just nothing. And then you get to the end and you're like, okay, now I just saw some horrific things and I still don't know if it was like all real or not. And you're like, what the heck? But then you talked about Anti-Birth, and that's more along the movie I think of as Shrooms. Have you seen that one?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I watched that one a few years back.
And that's one that keeps you the whole time you think one thing, and then at the end you're like, wait a second, what? Like,
so ultimately, it begged the question to me. I don't know if you guys give two shits about it, but from an audience's perspective, I think too much can spoil it, obviously. In my opinion, it can. That if you're throwing weirdness on top of weirdness, just fucking Jackson Pollock that motherfucker. You know, you may get a handful of people who see something in your madness, but you better hope that handful is the critics.
Right.
And absolutely, and I love the story about when Rob Zombie was getting interviewed while he was making Devil's Rejects, and they were shooting the scene where the girl escapes from the hotel and she gets hit by the truck,
Oh, yeah.
right? And it has that shot where her body's all mutilated on the ground, and they're setting it up and everything. And the interviewer who's interviewing Rob Zombie was like, it looked disgusting and grotesque. Why would you want to film something like that? And Rob Zombie response is, not all art is beautiful.
True.
Very true.
Which is that's something that's always kind of stuck around with me.
So it looks like we've wrapped around to ultimately, for as cliche as it is, it's in the eye of the beholder. And it may come down to personal preference as to how much you're willing to take or how much you're not willing to take or how much you demand as far as getting that level of engagement, or how much do you just want Friday the 13th? You just want to watch unstoppable killers slaughter idiots? Some people dig that. You want to watch Mastermind throw people in traps and watch these idiots fucking dice themselves up? That could be your thing. You want to watch two drug addicts in this neon pastel sloppy, disgusting shithole apartment they live in, and one swells up with a pregnancy that may or may not be alien, and suddenly, then it gets really, really gory and fucked up from there, then so be it. It may just come down to what you like, what gets your horror.
Yeah, but you just named every movie that we've ever watched, so I think maybe it's just like how you're feeling that day. Some days I want to see a super mainstream movie that I don't have to really put too much emotional thought into, and some days I want to watch something like Velvet Buzzsaw where I'm going to identify with the wrong people for the right reasons and feel everything all at once. And so, I think it really depends on how you're feeling that day.
And that's what makes horror so beautiful, and horror being the largest genre there is out there, because every other genre has these tropes that you have to follow that keep everything tight and niche. Action movies have to do this, and comedies have to do this. Whereas horror is kind of open-ended kind of thing. You can take elements of 5 different genres, put it in one film.
You can play with it as much as you want.
Horror can do that.
As long as you tap fear in some way.
As long as you make the audience feel something.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. That's kind of where I wanted to go. Eugene, you had something else?
Oh yeah, all right. So moving into our first
before you jump into that, I thought you had something on that topic, but I just for the listeners' edification, Alex, you didn't get Mother, you didn't really grasp it.
I understood the entire movie. I got the whole thing up until, I guess the reason that I had such an issue with it, there was a horrific scene towards the end, and I thought it was going to come to some conclusion. And then it wrapped around to the point where I wasn't sure. The twist was so hard that I wasn't sure if it was what they were shooting for.
Okay, do you know who the characters are?
Yes. Wait. Now you paused really long after I said yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So you know who the characters, who Darren Aronofsky. You know the story that Darren Aronofsky is telling, because the story that Darren Aronofsky is telling is not about a writer, his wife, and their house. That's not the story.
Right. I guess maybe I don't fully understand, because you can feel an element of every single thought you have on a movie is wrong.
Yeah, Javier Bardem. Here it is for you. Okay, Javier Bardem is God. Javier Bardem is God. Michelle Pfeiffer and Ed Harris are Adam and Eve. All the people that swarm the house at the end, that's humanity as a whole. And Jennifer Lawrence is the Earth.
Yeah, that sounds about Darren Aronofsky.
Damn it.
That sounds about right.
Oh my God.
So it makes sense now?
Yeah. And yeah.
And
if you need a minute, you to process that.
All the pieces fall into place.
Seriously. That's hard though, because that was a really rough movie to watch because there was so
It
many
was.
there was so many relatable elements that you like every step of the way you felt for every single character, and even the ones that were in the wrong, like you understood they were taken, like I guess it would be like all the sins that like you commit every day and just making them into people, and that's kind of intense now that
And the destruction of the house and the destruction of her because she's tied to the house, and that's nature. The house is nature.
and she fights
She
back,
herself,
but you know
she
oh
herself
man,
is the earth, but ultimately succumbs to it. But ultimately, God just restarts again, and it's just the cycle over and over again because that's all God wants. Is God wants the praise, and the earth is being sacrificed in the interim.
that's so intense. Cool. See,
Yeah.
it makes a lot more sense.
It took me about 75% of the movie to figure out what the hell was going on, and or to basically suss it out. And then at the end, that final sequence where that final sequence, when Jennifer Lawrence does that whole thing. Then I was like, oh holy shit! And then it wraps around and it started again. I was like, oh my god, she's the Earth, she's Mother Earth.
I guess
And
it makes so much. That's insane.
And God keeps resetting it back because humanity cannot help but destroy it in their desperation to worship God. And the earth,
he just wants to praise.
Yeah, and the
He
earth
sacrifices
keeps getting
the earth in praise, and that's terrifying as well.
So it's wild, yeah. And I was kind of like, holy shit!
That's
it was
crazy. That's
it was definitely a bit more complex than the Fountain was, and the Fountain took me a couple of watches.
Intense.
That one took me a few watches to really grasp, but Mother I thought was a really, really elegant story told in the most extreme way possible. And it was like, look, we know what you're doing and we know why you're doing it, but you're fucking up the earth in the process of it, and we're not going to get it back. Okay? And so that was Aronofsky just basically saying, whether you want to call it an ecology statement or whatever, or whether he's a tree hugger or whatever like this, but ultimately that's his story, and he found the most extreme way to personify those elements, and I thought it really was brilliant, and I know why a lot of people were put off by it because it was so extreme. So that's that kind of thing we were talking about, the abstract, being abstract. It was, did his message get lost because he went so extreme in the personification of his elements? So, and how it can detract, because I know a lot of people did not get that fucking message. They did not get it.
Mm-hmm. The abstract part of it though is like I was saying, you can connect to every single aspect of it. So it's like you're sitting there and you're like trying to figure out what's going on. So I feel like maybe the message was slightly lost, but also maybe in the name, because it was like he put that exclamation point on the end of Mother on the cover, and that threw me off because I was thinking about it the whole time. Like, what does that have to do with the movie? I feel like maybe they could have just dropped a small hint, because that would have made. But it also, okay, so then you get, it's like a poem almost. So I guess God is like a poet.
It,
I don't know. The movie plays out like a poem, and that makes a lot more sense.
Ultimately, Mother with the exclamation point is the focus, because God cannot have humanity without her,
right?
And humanity cannot reach God without her. So it's through her that everyone does their shit, and she is ultimately the sacrificial lamb for everybody else to get their fucking rocks off.
Yep.
Brutal film, but really, really.
Yeah, it was good. That was a good one.
I'm glad. I felt the pieces fall into place for you. I really did.
No, seriously.
It was like the sun came up and it was like, oh my god!
It weighed really heavy on me. That, you know what scene I'm talking about? Like towards the end, there's a scene, and it really, like, being a parent, that was rough. That was really, really hard to watch. And then I stopped it at that point, and I had to take a break. And then I came back with a clear head and tried to finish it off. I got to the end, and I was like, okay, maybe. but like I have no conclusion. And that now that you said that, it was like, okay, yep.
And the thing is, somebody's gonna be listening, and we're gonna be talking about Mother. All of a sudden, they're going, "Oh yeah, I get it too."
and I will bring the sun to you all.
That's like, oh.
All right. Okay. Cool.
All right. Now that we got that puzzle solved. All right.
All right, Eugene. What do we got this week?
All right. So we got a nice film that came out. It was actually on Veterans Day, right? November 11th, 1994, directed by Neil Jordan, right? Based off of a screen. No, she actually wrote the screenplay. Anne Rice, she wrote it. And it stars Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas, and a whole list of others. A huge, huge cast. And it's the movie Interview with a Vampire.
Woo woo.
Woo!
I'm dangerous in a sexy way.
Oh man, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise. Hey.
We're gonna try to cram in as many A-listers as we can in this movie.
Just because it was 1994 and it was like, we can do this. It's totally cool, man. And and then people hung on to it, and we still do it nowadays, except we do it in a much just more not scary way. There was something dark and mysterious, and it was kind of sexy about the whole Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, and they're this, or do they like each other? Like each other? And
dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Antonio Banderas was fucking smoking hot in that movie.
Everybody was. It was so sexual, but it was supposed to be sexy. And then when you're talking about Twilight, like sparkly glittery vampires nowadays, how did we go from like the good sexy to bad sexy? That's not even, no, because bad sexy is sexy. This is just terrible sexy.
I'm telling you, a friend of mine refers to Bella in the book series, but basically also in the movies, that Bella is not a person, Bella is pants. Okay. So he calls her pants because she's designed for anyone watching the movie or reading the book. She's designed for anybody to put her on. Okay, that they can put themselves. They can put themselves into the role of Bella. That is why she comes off as so cardboard.
Because she is.
Just kind of like she's not there. It's just like, oh, because she's pants. It's designed. The character's designed for the girls that watch it to put themselves in her place. They can replace her. Instead of just identifying with her, they could be like, "Oh, I could be that," and basically it's just, it furthers audience engagement with tweens and shit like that, and sparkly fucking vampires. What the shit? What the?
So this movie though,
I'm sorry.
No.
Stephanie Meyer's never gonna listen to this shit, but fuck, woman.
Damn. That one should have just stayed a book. They just had all these really young actors and nothing for them to play in because they're in that weird fucking awkward, just like 14 to 17 stage where they can't really like do something really sexy, but maybe they'll work out, so let's keep them around. And then they came up with this just terrible idea to just, what's the biggest tween book right now? Oh, sexy vampires? Let's make some of them gay and some of them like Norwegian, and we'll call it a diverse film. It was like, what are you doing?
We'll have them just glare at each other, just sexually looking at each other.
You mentioned...
Question your sexuality.
I'm strangely attracted to you. So you mentioned before, you were talking about the casting in that, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and actually there was some major controversy around those castings because initially the actors who were casted are not who Anne Rice envisioned at all. She had there were French actors that she was aware of, and just all these these weird unknowns, obscure people that she imagined it. But the studio, of course, got a hold of it And so they start going for top list stuff. They use for A-listers. And so they cast Brad Pitt in the role of Louis. Well, originally they weren't 100% sure who was going to be Louis, and they eventually went with Brad Pitt, and that took some time. And then, of course, Lestat, everybody, I think all the readers and Anne Rice herself threw up this huge fit when Tom Cruise was selected, because Anne thought it should have been someone with, real, I guess real presence, like John Malkovich. And trying to imagine John Malkovich as Lestat is fucking funny. But
That'd be rough.
So initially Tom Cruise got cast, and Anne Rice threw a fit about it. She's like, no, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, when the movie came out, she did a complete 180 and ended up calling him personally to apologize for the things that she said and to thank him for the performance that he gave. And of course, Kirsten Dunst. Kirsten Dunst was literally discovered, like, that was because that was her first role, and discovered at that age. She was literally the first girl they found and the first girl they tested for the role, and she got it. Like, boom.
Like that.
Wait, are you talking about?
Like, that's it. Just right off the bat.
Talking about Twilight? Or no, Kirsten Dunst.
No, talking about Interview.
Oh God, yeah. Okay, sorry.
So when they were going to cast,
that was her first.
That was her first. They're casting the character Claudia.
Yeah. So when they were casting her, they went out to look, and a talent scout found her, and they tested her, and she was it. Like, boom. So having an actor land in your lap like that does not happen in this industry. It's like, you hear people getting discovered and shit, and I think I can name like 3 where they literally just went out and found them. Like, boom, there you are. So,
like, right off the bat.
Exactly. And then, of course, the author throwing a huge temper tantrum about who's going to be playing her character, and then all the difficulties in it, and trying to put this entire cast together, because you had Antonio Banderas, you had, I believe you had Stephen Rhee in that, and then Kirsten Dunst. They found Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, and then all
Christian Slater.
Christian Slater, who originally it wasn't going to be Chris Slater, it was supposed to be River Phoenix.
Oh,
ooh, that might be one that would have been okay.
Yeah, River Phoenix was originally supposed to play that role, and then he sadly passed away.
Rip, dude. Missed that, dude.
And so Christian Slater was literally like, because he died like, I think 2 weeks before production began, or it was really, really tight. So he passed away, and it was like, oh my God. And the nearest person they could jump on was that fit the screen test was Christian Slater.
That's intense.
That is. So I wanted to go give a little bit of a plot just real quick for those of you who haven't seen it. And so Interview the Vampire is
an interview
about
with a vampire.
Sorry. Interview with a vampire.
Sorry, Eugene.
Interview with a vampire.
It's about an interview with a vampire.
It's about an interview.
Contrary to popular belief,
end.
it's actually just an interview with a vampire.
Yeah. That's just it. He talks.
He's like, "Hey, what's up?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Eugene. Go ahead. Go, dude.
So just real quick. So it's about you have this character Daniel who goes and he interviews Louis, who basically claims to be a vampire, and Louis talks about who is played by Brad Pitt, and he talks about how he's been a vampire for 200 years, and he started off on a plantation in Louisiana. And he starts talking about his encounter with Lestat, and basically Louis goes and gets transformed into a vampire around 1791, and then they go and then Lestat has to kind of start training him on how to be a vampire and realizing the fact that no, you have to actually kill people now. Kind of thing. You have to kind of do horrible things and kill people. It's not just fun and, twinkling and glittering in the sun. You got to do horrible things for that. You have to.
Let's just keep fucking bashing that movie. Let's do that.
Stephanie Meyer, fuck.
Stephanie Meyer being one of our 5 listeners. She's like, what the fuck?
Sorry,
it's double blame. It's double blame because if it wasn't for Twilight, we wouldn't have 50 Shades.
That's true.
So that's like 2 strikes.
Yeah,
are you sure? I think the whole dominatrix thing probably would have busted out anyways.
Possibly, but the fact that 50
not like that.
The fact that 50 Shades started as a fucking Twilight fanfic.
Yeah, well,
And then she just changed it up to, whatever. I'm not going down that dirty little rabbit hole.
phrasing.
Optics.
Going dark.
Fuck, I'm gonna have to put a trigger warning on this fucking episode.
Anyways, yeah, you gotta put the little E by it for explicit.
I do. I have to put them on every single one of these.
Nice.
And so, so basically they go and they end up siring a little girl named Claudia, played by Kristen Dunst, and they head over to Europe. And while they're over there, they go and they actually encounter a production company that actually puts on plays for humans where they actually kill real people in front of them, and everybody applauds and stuff like that. It was one of my favorite scenes in that film. Whenever they meet Antonio Banderas and Stephen Ray, and then they ended up poisoning Lestat to try to get rid of him. The troop finds out about it. The troop goes and attacks Claudia and attacks Louis, and some good stuff happens. I don't want to spoil the ending for everything, but it's an interesting take on vampires.
It was that was the first one where they started making vampires sexy, right? I mean, vampires were always supposed to be kind of seductive, but that time period and a lot of
Nosferatu was very seductive with those
really, he wasn't seductive to
with
you?
those 12-inch fingers.
Just that, yeah, right. Come here. We're gonna put those. Anyways, so that time period just being coming out of the 80s, because that was a weird time, and I'm kind of sad that I missed that, but coming out of the 80s into the 90s, and you got kind of you're starting to get this these social justice movements are left and right, they're popping up, and so you get into this super controversial topic, but now that we're getting into this age of everybody's accepting everything, it's kind of like a good segue into an open-minded America for a good period of time.
Well, as long as the SJWs, who I don't have a problem with, there we go. I'm clarifying that statement. But as long as the SJWs keep going after, they can go after comedy. We do horror and some comedy, but we do horror, and so I'm glad they're leaving horror alone.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, yeah, because if you think about that, they started going after horror, we'd lose not 80% of what we watch. And so, thank God.
It's all super controversial, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Kind of thing. But it does bring up the interesting thing, because you start having a vampire, dealing with killing people. Because a lot of times in a lot of movies, we see from the human's perspective. We see the humans, and it's oh, vampires are bad, vampires are attacking me, I need to stay away from them. And it's not very often where you actually see you could keep in mind, this is before Buffy, before a lot of other stuff that's come out. Then you actually kind of see from the vampire perspective. When you get turned into a vampire, but you still have the mind of a human, and you don't want to kill people. I thought that was pretty interesting.
The vampires are people too, man. Or they used to be.
Yeah, they're people too.
Used to be.
They used to be before they did horrible things.
Well, thank God for movies like 30 Days of Night, Stakeland, Daybreakers,
30
for
Days
reminding
of
us.
Daybreakers.
Yeah, for reminding us that vampires are fucking monsters. They make monster movies about them. To quote Buffy the Vampire Slayer, vampires are monsters. They make monster movies about them. And so, yes. And
vampires are bad.
So thank God for those to remind us.
30 Days a Night, you're talking, no God. Oh God.
Okay. You mentioned that. Some people didn't get because he was no God, that whole thing like that. But there's a moment, and I love it. It fucking just sold me on that movie. Was when Eben comes up, he's injected himself with a vampire blood, and he's all fucking souped up and shit. And he's oh, I'm gonna go fight the lead vampire and shit. And he's striding across the deal, and he's oh, the one who fights, and blah blah blah. And then he whispers, "Come and see," to him. and that just fucking resonated with me. I don't know how many people caught that, but that's some fucking biblical revelation shit. Okay, and see, that's the vampires that I want. Okay, vampires who are fucking just, they think that this dude thinks he's the fucking, he thinks he is the Armageddon. He is the apocalypse. Yep. And he is the angel of death, and he was like, come and see. You know, like, I love that shit. And then, of course, he beat his fucking ass. It was sweet. Punched through his head.
Then he fucked his shit up. Yeah.
He fucked his shit up sideways.
Oh, yeah, dude. That was a great movie, too. I mean, they could have cast anybody else, but, you know.
But, yeah, you make it work.
You got to deal with it. It was a good storyline.
So that's a good question. That is an excellent question for the audience.
Yeah, so it's basically, go ahead and comment below and tell us who your favorite vampire is. Whether it's somebody from Interview the Vampire, or somebody from 30 Days or 30 Nights, or a bunch of other movies. But let us know who your favorite vampire is. Awesome.
All right, we're going to move one day ahead, and I believe 10 years after, we're going to November 12th, 2004, when this screen gem, Seed of Chucky, dropped in theaters.
This is the second one of the campy ones, right?
Out of the camp horror, yeah. When we've gone all the way from Child's Play to Bride of Chucky to now Seed of Chucky. Of course, keeping Brad Dourif as Chucky. You got Jennifer Tilly in that one, playing Tiffany, his wife, and then Billy Boyd as the Seed of Chucky, who, talking about controversial topics in the 90s and then moving into the 2000s, was the gender-confused child of these two serial killer reincarnated dolls. So you can imagine this got out of hand real fast.
It was, what do we call it, progressive?
See, when I watch this movie, like, you get like a real like scary movie vibe, but at the same time it's like super high budget. You got like, at that time, like, you got like Redman in this movie, who, if you did not know, was supposed to actually be Quentin Tarantino. That's who that part was written for. And so
that's even weirder.
I'm glad Redman played that part, because being like 14 when this movie came out, and I saw it when it came out, like, just seeing this whole pop culture horror movie, and like, I had seen Child's Play, and like, growing up I'd known it. I was always so scared of it, and then I saw this and I'm like, what? Even Bride of Chucky was kind of like, I was like kind of scared by it because I was young, but then like this, I was like, what do I do? What?
I'm just saying, any film that starts off with the title credits and you have like sperm going through.
It was the scene. It was super controversial. But I mean, it came down to, it started out with the child of Chucky and Tiffany like waking up to a nightmare that he was killing people, and then the child he's a good kid. He doesn't want to kill people. And then the conflict between Chucky and his wife about they're like trying to like not kill, and they're treating it like a drug addiction, and the wife of Chucky's going through the 12-step program and like trying to come off, and they're hiding it from each other, and they both have their relapses, and the whole thing was just like, oh, this went from a very scary movie to, you know, my next door neighbor's life story.
Oh my god. Well, thankfully this was it was the second of the two campy ones. Bride of Chucky being the first, and then Seed of Chucky being the second. And I'm so glad that, because when the franchise started out, it was that was pure horror, that first one.
Oh yes.
And I thought that, and the second one, I thought capitalized on that, and I actually liked the second one a little bit more, because we didn't have to go into the character development. We got these characters right off the bat, which means we can just run with them,
jump and go.
And yeah, Mancini did such a fantastic fucking job setting the whole thing up, and now we've got this fantastic universe that we can run with and we can play with. And so the first three, and I thought the three was a little wobbly. I think it just went.
They stretched it thin on that one.
They stretched it a little thin, and I thought they did some good things. There were some good moments in there that kind of allowed Chucky to play around like that, but I thought it was a little on the extreme side when you're getting to this point. Although the dude dying from the heart attack just from seeing him, that shit was fucking funny as hell. And the fact that the character, I think the character Chucky began to elicit laughs more like, he began to elicit laughs, but was not as violent or creative as Freddy. So I think that was the inspiration that took the direction into camp instead of just straight horror. And we got 2 camp films. We got Bride of Chucky, where we introduce Tiffany, and then he puts her in a doll, and shit like that. Then Seed of Chucky, where they have a kid, and it's all fucking weird. That was a strange one. Funny as, it had funny moments. It really did, but very, very weird. But then something shifted, and we went, with Curse of Chucky back to straight horror.
Because straight up.
Yep. Yeah, so we got this little kind of camp thing. So maybe I think it was the kind of the air of that time in the early 2000s when camp horror with the advent of the scary movie series and the teen movies and shit like that, where campy stuff was kind of the rage and was just, people wanted to laugh more. And then, of course, after Seed of Chucky, it's kind of like, where do we go? Can we, there's only so many times we can put John Waters in a movie to make it funny. And so, then let's just go back to the roots, and then we'll make it, we'll go back straight horror, because Curse of Chucky was fucking phenomenal.
That was a good one.
And I love the fact that Brad Dourif's daughter, Fiona, is in the series now.
Right.
Because she's a super talented little actress. And so I like that they've gone that way. Maybe we needed this in order to get back to straight horror, to realize where the roots of the franchise were. But I think they made a smart move. But these two can be appreciated for what they are, I think.
Yeah, because I think going back into the time period is during that real early 2000s when you start having the scary movies come out and you start getting these camp and parodies, because you start getting was like Freddy versus Jason coming out at that time. And, there's a scene where he runs Britney Spears off the road and she blows up kind of thing. Come on, that's exactly what they're going for. And I think with this one coming out in 2004, then all of a sudden you hit Saw and The Grudge that come out later that year or the same year, the next year, and then all of a sudden people get right back into horror kind of thing. So you had the campiness of that real early 2000s, and then all of a sudden you get these true horror movies that start coming out again in 04 and 05, and it's now we're going right back into horror.
Everybody's laughing. And then they're like, yeah, no, watch this. And you're like, oh.
See, that's a very interesting. I'm not saying that correlation doesn't mean causation, but it's interesting that the timeline of horror correlates that way, that around that time, Seed of Chucky was coming out. Big, the big things were campy horror. People were laughing, while people were getting stabbed and shit. But then J horror started up with the Ring and the Grudge and so on and so forth. And then we start seeing the influence of J horror and K horror, Korean horror, and Takashi Miike is all of a sudden coming to the States, and we're watching shit like Audition and Citizen X and The Happiness of the Kataguris. And so that influence kind of pushed back. It was almost like, shit, America, you don't know what fucking horror is.
You're making a good point there, because the Japanese had some of the most terrifying stories.
Dude, fuck, man, some of their shit is so goddamn scary.
Why? Do they need to get out and socialize more, or is it because they? No, this is an honest question. If somebody can answer this question, that'd be great. Do the Japanese have such? Is it because of their culture and stories in the past? Is it because they're so populated that stories pass, telephone really hard, and they get these crazy ideas? Or is it traditional, or is this? I don't know. That's insane, because they have the scariest shit. The scariest stuff comes out of that Asia. Why are you guys so terrifying?
I think, and one thing that makes it, I think that appeals to it, and also appeals in American horror, is that J horror and K horror do not rely heavily on fake effects. and that they really do stick to practical landing. Okay, so that's like, it's not, it's either puppetry or it's actors, and I think American cinema has always done that well, done that well in that arena as well.
Yeah, because the thing is with practical effects, it gives something that the actors can actually interact with, and it feels real. Like, we can know majority of the time when something is CG or it's fake on like a movie. I mean, like we can kind of tell. And one of the things that's kind of stood out with even the whole Child's Play series is the fact that they've always relied on animatronics, kind of thing. The Tony Garner was the one who actually did the majority of the effects throughout the entire series, kind of creating the animatronic dolls, and even some of the earlier ones having a guy dressed up as a suit hopping down off the table, kind of thing. And a little trivia: Tony Garner actually plays himself in the film, and he's the guy who is, when they're making the movie, he's the guy that goes in and starts messing with them, and then they ended up like wrapping a wire around him and decapitating him.
He's like, if you want me to fix them, I gotta take them apart. Wow, that was not.
So yeah, that's actually him. That's the guy who does all the effects for the Child's Play movies, and he even did the effects for Zombieland too, the first one.
Okay, is that narcissism, or is that like, I'm bored, just like let me do something? Hey, look at me.
I definitely believe it's always been something that has really kind of set the series out, instead of going around with like a little CG doll like Jar Jar Binks or something like that's running around.
Absolutely. So when it comes down to it, like the question I guess would be the camp horror process. Is it camp horror, or is it not? So like, a scary movie, it's an obvious funny movie. It's supposed to be funny, but you still get the slasher gore concept. And then you get into the Seed of Chucky, and it still plays on the Chucky. It still plays on the psychological part of the whole thing. With a little, is it dark horror? Is it dark comedy?
Oh, the word I've always heard was it's like splatter comedy or splattery, something like that. That's the word I've always heard about.
Like, it's funny, and there's like funny parts, but it's still supposed to be scary. I don't know. I think I like that era when you were talking about getting back into like Saw and real horror and stuff. I think I like more of that straight horror type stuff. So like, so what do you like? Do you like the comic stuff? Do you like the straight psychological stuff like we talked about earlier?
I've always been a fan of kind of the more straight, like traditional, like horror to it. There are some camp ones that I do like, but the ones that stick in my mind as like the greatest horror films ever are the ones that aren't funny.
Right. And we know J horror terrifies JL here.
Yes. Japanese horror is fucking scary as shit. But like I was saying, I think it's because there's something visceral there. Something in the brain says that when it's CGI or when it's a green screen like this, your brain can tell the difference, even on a minute level. And when there's something physically there for the actors to interact, for me to interact with as an audience member, that shit's fucking scary. And they rely very heavily on that with classic camera tricks, with classic animatronics, with classic puppetry, or actors who are just really fucking good at what they do.
Well,
and yeah, I've always found it to be straight scary. But ultimately, for our listeners, what do you think? Do you prefer the campy horror? Do you prefer the scary movies, the Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky? Or do you just like straight horror? Do you just want to see Child's Play 2, Curse of Chucky, stuff like that? Do you prefer the straight horror or the camp horror? Let us know in the comments. Well, the next one we've got, we're going way back in the Wayback Machine, November 13th, 1933, and we're going back into the stable of Universal Horror. This is The Invisible Man, the original, the one and only. So a black and white film, absolutely amazing. It was directed by James Whale, based on The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. But the screenplay was written by R.C. Sheriff, and it starred Gloria Stewart and Claude Rains. Claude Rains, the man, the Invisible Man himself. And in essence, the plot revolves around the Invisible Man, Dr. Jack Griffin, who predominantly is only a disembodied voice, because only towards the end of the film do we actually see what he physically looks like, because he's invisible for the whole film. And his desperate race to try and find a cure for his invisibility as it's slowly driving him mad. And we literally, this one of the great things about this film is that the film literally drops you straight into the action and reveals who you're dealing with within the first 10 minutes. Because you go in and it's like this guy walks into the inn. He wants a room for the night. He's covered in bandages and has these dark goggles over his eyes. And then people are looking at him weird. It's like, who is this guy? What's going on? And then all of a sudden there's a ruckus in his room and he's wrecking the place. They call the police to have him removed. And in that moment, he starts laughing wildly. And it's that epic scene where Claude Rains is just laughing his ass off and he's unwrapping himself in front of this room of people. And he's invisible.
You want to know who I am? You want to know who I am?
And freaks out, like that. And then the movie carries on from there. So it literally drops you smack dab into the action. This is the Invisible Man. This is who you're dealing with. And that beautifully done horror, fantastic. And the effects in that always got me. Just 1933, like how?
And so diving into the effects of the film, what makes it like awesome is the fact that, this is like pre-computer, you don't get like After Effects or all these programs where you can just kind of digitally like composite like somebody out or stuff like that. This was practical in-camera stuff that they used, and then going into editing. And remember back then with editing was you took a physical film strip, cut it with scissors, and then taped it together, and that's how you actually edited back then. So this is like hands-on process, and the way they're able to actually get the effect of it, which is genius for 1933, is that they actually had the main actor Claude Rains dress up in a black velvet suit. It's a pure black velvet suit on top of what he was regularly wearing for his costume, and they shot him up against a black velvet background. So you had basically, it was like a black on black. So it's almost like pre-green screen kind of thing before there was a green screen. And so with that coming across the screen as black, and then they would take a shot of the background separately. And basically they would scrape off all the black off the film and then overlay it with a shot they have of the background on top of it. So that's how they're able to get the invisible effect of him moving around in his suit and his clothes and stuff like that.
Holy shit. I can't even imagine the level of work that went into that, because that's working frame by frame.
Yeah, that's a team of people going through on, when you're editing, you're cutting it and you're overlaying these film strips to make sure it's overlaid correctly, and you're actually going in and like scraping off stuff. Like really getting in there. It's incredible and very tedious and time consuming.
Now back then they were shooting 32 millimeter, right? Or is it 16?
It's either 16 or 35.
Oh, actually, you think you're right. I think it might be 35. But even then, you're looking at that many frames per second, and just having to. I can't even imagine the level of work. Of hours of work that went in there, because you do, what is that? You do how many frames is that per second? Is it 30?
Yeah. So for most people, film is shot is typically at 24 frames per second, kind of thing, and that's already been established. So you're looking at 24 frames per second at this point, and the way films were edited back then, as opposed to today, an editor is a very high, top-notch job. They're usually friends with the director. A lot of famous directors will have their editor that they go to and they work with very closely. Back then, you basically sent it to almost like a sweatshop. And that was how editing was done back then. You would basically have like a team of, and primarily it was women at the time. It was a team of women that would like cut your film, and you didn't really have a person kind of oversee it, but it's not like the real hands-on editing is today. So you had a team of people that would go through and have to put this together. Very minute detail, tedious work. of a team of people.
You're literally talking about like cutting up film and gluing it together and editing this physically on the negatives by hand. Yeah,
Yes.
I know that.
insane.
And you get a taste of that. You get a taste of that in the movie in Fight Club when they showed Tyler Durden splicing images from other movie, images from pornography into in the family films. But he was using that same device where you line it up and then you line it up by the markings on the side, and which incidentally is also where the sound goes. Is the little trim pieces on the edges to sync the sound to the actual reel. And then you have that slider that slides down and cuts it precisely. And then you just move and then it has another deal. And then you move it down and it has another thing that lays the tape on that lays flush. And then you just cut it and then you're good to go. And if you got handy with the machine, you could actually go quite fast. I know that people go there, but you're talking about scraping that stuff off there. You're doing trick photography with an overlay, and then you're having to scrape that out at 24 frames per second. And that scene where he's unwrapping himself, that lasted a few minutes.
Oh yeah. Now with that, they end up also kind of throwing in a couple of like props and practical stuff. So when on some of the parts, like when he first kind of starts unwrapping, you will have an actual prosthetic in place to kind of help kind of guide some of that. But yeah, most of it was just him in the velvet suit, and apparently he was very claustrophobic, Claude Rains, and so eventually they had to get a stunt double to do it for him.
Oh wow. That is wild. Making movies in the 30s. That I both envy and don't envy those guys in the process like that. But it certainly is. It obviously is a lost art, and I think filmmakers today need to remember where they came from. And nowadays you throw a green screen in the back, you put them in a green suit, blah, blah, this, you could do whatever the hell you want. You put a little laser right there, and we can insert whatever we like. We saw videos of WiH Workshop. The Weta Workshop doing all that stuff with Lord of the Rings, making entire landscapes, adjusting it from New Zealand to make what they wanted. And nowadays it takes months still, but these guys will point, click, 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 and we're good to go. Back then, you got motherfuckers sitting in a dark room scraping shit by hand.
It's insane.
And God help you if you fuck up a frame, man.
And they didn't just do that one movie. They had 6 movies in there. The second one came out, The Invisible Man Returns, then The Invisible Woman. Those both came out in the 40s. Invisible Agent, Invisible Man's Revenge. Like that went on.
There was the people working in that little sweatshop.
Like, they're making another one.
Oh fuck! They're making another one.
Oh fuck!
God damn it!
Damn it, James Whale.
And they're making these movies like in the 40s, 42, 44, like right fucking smack dab in the middle of World War II. They're like, well, I guess we could be over there, like at the front lines of the battlefield. I guess
maybe my job isn't as
it's
bad.
It's not that bad.
And you actually had John P.
You want to shoot at people? Like I don't.
Film it is. Film scrape. And actually had John P. Fulton, who came up with the visual effects for the first one. He did all the Invisible Man. Yeah. Yeah. You did it. You figured it out. We're just going to keep.
He's
you
like,
all.
yeah. So we'll just pay you. How much do you want? You just have most of it. You take all the profit from the first 3, and we'll take all the profit from the second 3. He's like, you're not good at math, are you?
Just go with that.
But that gave us a whole host of, obviously Universal made, they capitalized huge, made a bunch of Invisible Men. Hammer Horror, I think, also dabbled in that as well. But we've gotten a bunch all the way up to Kevin Bacon as Hollow Man, and so. And then of course, but the last one I remember was the Invisible Man used in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah,
and
the Sean Connery film.
I don't recall another. I don't think there's been another Invisible Man movie.
I think that's when they called it.
With the new Universal Dark, them trying to kind of bring back their kind of like do new Universal versions of the new stuff of their old monsters. I know they've been having a really hard time trying to run with that, because the Wolfman just didn't click the way they wanted it to, and then Tom Cruise's Mummy was just abysmal.
That was fantastic. No, I'm just kidding.
I seriously thought you were gonna go.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser was awesome. I mean, oh shit, the other one.
So yeah, and then that was just. I know that the Invisible Man was on their slate for trying to bring that for the new Universal Dark to basically kind of reboot the Universal Monsters franchise.
How do you think they would do the Invisible Man?
See, I don't know, because they keep trying to do these kind of new things, and they keep falling on their faces.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you could pull that one off nowadays, though.
See, I think the key to the Dark Universe is you have to go back to its horror roots. They're trying to do these action, adventure kind of stuff instead of let's make it an actual horror movie. Let's make it straight up scary, closer to the Conjuring universe.
Yeah, let's get some Peter Cushing and some Christopher Lee up in this bitch.
Make me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, let's make it scary. Yeah, that's what Universal needs.
Then that's a question. Well, what's up, Alex?
No, I'm just saying, moving forward, it all drops back into the way that the movie makes you feel. You got to start scaring people again. Stop trying to use technology as a medium for horror. Stop trying to make everything modern day and super relatable. Start making people feel uncomfortable. Start making characters unrelatable. Start putting people in take away the CGI and bring back realistic effects where you get these people in here that they're like, wow, that would be creepy to see. Let's make it happen without CGI. And then you start getting somebody, crawling backwards on their hands, but it looks realistic. Make me uncomfortable. Make these Universal monsters, bring them back, but make them scary.
I think that's part of what made Insidious so scary. It's because Insidious was a creepy little film, but I don't think there may have been some atmospheric effects that were CGI in that. There may have been some touch-ups here and there, but predominantly that was all practical.
Most of that was practical effects, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it was super creepy.
Just that shot of that demon hanging out behind Patrick Wilson's character.
Yeah.
Hey, it was okay, that was creepy as shit. So that poses a question for the audience. What do you think of the Universal Dark Universe? Should Universal be bringing these movies back? Should they be trying to reboot these films? They don't seem to be doing very well. Or should they leave well enough alone? Should they just leave them in the vault? Let other people dabble with them? Well, we'll get the occasional Dracula, the occasional creature from the Black Lagoon movie. We'll get that, but should they leave well enough alone, or should they just take it another direction? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm just saying, just scare people again. Plus, it's almost coming up on 100 years.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah, this shit's gonna be in the public domain here pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, you're right. All right, so the next movie we got here is it's a fun no budget film that came out November 16th, 1984, right? Directed by Tom Eberhardt, if I butcher that pronunciation, I'm sorry. Starring Robert Beltran, Catherine Mary Stewart, Kelly Moraney, Sharon Farrell, and a list of others. And the movie is Night of the Comet.
Oh, I love this movie.
It is fun. This is the quintessential. The way I like to describe it is if 28 Days Later was made in the 80s.
That's okay.
Because you got the wide, the movie shot in LA, so you got the wide shots of the apocalypse happening, so everybody's gone, so you have those wide shots of them walking around LA, and they're going through a mall, and it's all these empty streets and all this other kind of stuff, but you still got the mall montage in there kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
And so for those of you who haven't seen it, so just basically what it's about, and it's a comet that passes over Earth, and the last time the comet came by, it basically killed the dinosaurs, not hitting the planet, but just fly over, kills the dinosaurs. So most people want to go and look at this comet and all this other kind of stuff. and we got our two main characters, Reggie and Sam, who through different events are like, well, we're going to stay inside. One stays in projector booth, other stays in like this metal shed. And then when they wake up the next morning, if the comet comes by, everybody's like gone. They've just turned to dust. Like everybody is like done, over with. And then there's zombies, occasional zombies here and there, stuff like that. But for the most part, everybody's like gone and like turned to dust. So they're like running around in LA with everybody gone.
Now, I haven't seen this movie in a long time. Was the whole thing like because everybody was like super excited to see this thing, like you said, like I can't remember if they told them like it was safe, like if the scientists said it was safe, or if they knew. I can't remember at the beginning.
They didn't think anything about it. They mentioned, it was like, okay, well, this came around about the time the dinosaurs were killed, but they never made like a connection.
They were never really like, yeah. They were, we probably shouldn't be okay with standing outside during this event. But no, they did, and now everybody's freaking zombies. That's cool.
Kind of thing. And so, you get like this, and so the people who look at the comet were like basically like disintegrated, and then the people who like breathed in some of the air but didn't look at directly turned to zombies, and then you have like a couple of characters that are safe and stuff like that. But it's a fun 80s movie. It's really fun. It's the movie was shot on like $700,000.
That has a lot. Yeah, it was such a good movie that it was shot on $700,000, and they made something like 14.4 mil on that movie.
Yeah,
like worldwide. On the opening weekend alone, they made 3.5 million. So like, you got to think, these people made this movie. They're like, this is actually kind of good. They dropped this movie. They have like no money to advertise, and so then the $700,000, you're like, fuck it, put it out there. And then the weekend they make $3.5 million. They're probably sitting there like,
And that's 1984 money.
That's 84. 3.5 million on opening weekend. They were seriously. That's insane. $14 million. Think about it. I mean, today, 30 would have been, I don't know how you calculate that, but it has to be pretty close to double that amount's worth. You got a couple of people, it's $700,000, which isn't a whole lot. That's like 2 people's mortgages, and then all of a sudden they're millionaires off of this.
Okay, so apparently you asked, and I had to look it up. So about $100 in 1984 is equivalent to about $241 in 2018.
So that's almost one and a half times. So
yeah, you're looking at probably 30 million, something like that.
$30 to $40 million. Off of a $700 budget. That'd be like my house,
$30 million opening. With inflation, I think that kills Blair Witch Project.
Oh, it has to.
For a $30 million opening weekend, that's not a major blockbuster these days, but that's like what you shoot for a typical like Zombieland 2 would shoot for $30 million opening weekend.
Oh, opening weekend was only 3.5, so it would have been like what, $8-9 million?
Yeah, 9 million.
It was $9 million.
Still $9 million on okay, so 700,000. You want to get into it, so like $1.4 million budget. And you double that in your first opening weekend, and then you take it up to, $30-40 million. Everybody's eating pretty good that weekend.
Well, you got to think, like, you're filming it, and you're thinking, okay, your people are pulling their money together to try to get this thing filmed. They're like, will anybody ever see it? Because, this isn't today where you have all these streaming services and YouTube, and, you can make something, throw it out there and hope it goes viral. This is like, you got to get a distributor because you have to get it in theaters. You got to get your film print copied because, the movies are still on film at that point. And so you're hoping, you don't know if anybody's ever going to see this film. Like, honestly, because so many low budget films fall by the wayside, and then all of a sudden it blows up.
Not to mention it's kind of a sci-fi horror in like the land of slasher horrors.
Yeah,
because this was 1984, and you had Texas Chainsaw out in '78. You had Friday the 13th in 1980. You had this was November 16th, so you had just before this, Nightmare on Elm Street, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Halloween is already out. So this was like this was like the heyday of slasher films, and yet this horror sci-fi movie comes along and kind of does what I think nobody thought it could do, which is kind of neat to think that sci-fi horror, that horror with sci-fi elements still had a place even amongst the titans of who we consider the titans of horror today.
And I think you hit a good point, is the timing, because in '84 horror is so big and low budget horror is so big, because those movies like Nightmare on Elm Street weren't shot on a huge budget.
Yeah.
And so you can start having some of these studios and some of these distributors are looking for these low key, low budget, hoping to hit the next Halloween, the next Friday the 13th. So if this movie was made maybe 10 years earlier or even 10 years later, it might not have been picked up.
One thing I absolutely love about Night of the Comet, and I was so stoked because I think anybody who knows me personally knows I'm a big fan of Joss Whedon, but I am a tremendous fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I followed that show relentlessly. Yes, I know all the words to the musical episode to Once More with Feeling. For everybody's throwdown, my absolute favorite episode is Hush, and my most heartbreaking episode is the season finale of season 2. I'm just gonna lay that out there because people who hear this will know what I'm talking about. But ultimately, I bring this up because Joss Whedon took inspiration from Kelly Maroney's character Sam, because at the time the character was 16 years old, and she spends the majority of her time on the movie in her cheerleading outfit, and she ultimately would become the inspiration for the character that would be Buffy Summers, and would inspire Joss to create her, because this movie had not one but two strong female leads in Reggie and her sister Sam. And those iconic images of Sam with the machine gun in her fucking cheerleader outfit, and then years later, and then just I think it was less than a decade later, Joss Whedon would create Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it was created with Kristy Swanson, who spends pretty much the climax of that movie in her cheerleading outfit. The strong female type, only instead of killing zombies like in Night of the Comet, she's killing vampires, Vampire Slayer. So, but I always dug that, to finding out that connection went that far back to one of our favorite television, one of our favorite female heroines.
Yeah, because it's not very often you get two strong female characters in a horror movie. So a lot of times they'll have like the one, who's always like the final girl kind of thing. And even then, sometimes she's like just strong enough, or she just has that one clever moment that she but it's not often that you get a female character who's strong throughout the entire film, let alone two.
Oh yeah, they were first girls and final girls all the way through.
Yeah, they fight back, and they would go, and it's when there's the scene where they're fighting the scientists and stuff like that. And I mean, it's just they were spunky. They were.
Eugene's got a crush.
They were super cute. They were.
I'm just saying, I watched Chopping Mall, and I was like,
I love that.
I wonder who she is.
I fucking love that movie. I hate that title. I love that movie, but I hate that title.
Terrible
the original title that was Killbots.
That's so much better.
That is so much better.
It is so much better.
Killbots. Not Chopping Mall. That's stupid. I told it to my wife. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to show you this movie. It's about killer robots in a mall." And they're like, "Sweet, yeah." It used to when they released it, it was called Killbots. It was like, "Oh, but it's not called Killbots. It's called Chopping Mall." And my wife like fucking looked at me like, "What?"
Fuck you, I'm going to the grocery store.
She looked at me like I changed the fucking name of the movie.
What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm going to bed.
It's like, what are you doing to me? It's like, I didn't change the movie.
Come on, Choppy Ball, trust me. Please? Kelly Maroney.
That movie was fucking sweet. So, that's a question for our listeners, is favorite no-budget film? Because this movie was no fucking budget. Even in 1984, this was below shoestring.
Think about that. You've got to come up with that entire film. People have to sit and cut and paste and do all that stuff on 700,000. That's insane.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really low budget films, and you got to give it up to these directors and the actors for doing what they do because they love it, and not because of the money.
Well, thank God they shot in 80s LA, because you just look at the streets at that time, it was just production value all over the place.
No.
Yeah, so they actually I was looking into it, and so they shot it Christmas Day, right? Like at 6 a.m.
Ew.
So that's how they're able to get all the empty streets and stuff like that.
That makes sense.
Nice.
You got to time it out. That's super cool. So yeah, favorite low budget, no budget film. Moving on. We got a birthday today this week. 11/11, Make-A-Wish. 1951 was the birth of Bill Moseley.
Yes, Bill.
Yes.
One of my favorite character actors.
Great character actor. Otis in Three from Hell. And just a whole just weird range of... If you've heard of it, he's probably been in it.
And this cat has worked with everybody.
Just an unbelievable amount of people. I mean, even looking up just some of the stuff he's been doing still. He's running stuff. He's got stuff in pre-production that you won't see until next year for sure. But with Three from Hell, and then I don't know if you ever saw him as Doc in Shed of the Dead. You can start rattling stuff off. He's probably connected to most of the horror movies or horror genre directors that you know.
Well, yeah, he got his start in '86 as Chop Top in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yep. He was in Z Nation, if you were ever in on that, but he was in Texas Chainsaw 3D. So he was through that whole franchise. He was in a lot of spoof movies and
yeah, he was in Night of the Living Dead, the 1990s one.
Yeah.
Oh, the Tom Savini directed one, yeah.
And then he even played there was a spoof, it was Night of the Little Dead or something like that. He's just participated in so much stuff. Can't believe
he's touched on so many, because not only he was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, he was also in the Night of the Living Dead franchise. He was also in the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. He touched on that one. He was in Army of Darkness, so he was in the Evil Dead franchise in a way, And I mean, and then House of Thousand Corpses is what really put him on the map as an actual as an actor instead of a bit character or a character actor. Devil's Rejects, and then Three from Hell. We got that, but he's had a slew of stuff in the middle of that. But he's a huge horror actor, but he's done a ton of stuff that was not. He was also in The Blob, in the '88 remake of The Blob. So he was in that, but this cat was in Pink Cadillac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he worked with Clint Eastwood. He was in Honey I Blew Up the Kids with Rick Moranis. Mm-hmm. So
oh yeah.
Yeah, he has worked with, like I said, this guy has worked with everybody.
Yeah, he's played serial killers, and he's played also, he was in Repo the Genetic Opera.
He was in Repo.
He was in Luigi Largo. Yeah. Yeah, that was...
Oh yeah, he was in Halloween, the Rob Zombie remake kind of thing. I mean, he touched so many different franchises.
Right. And it's wild. It's wild because he was in Repo, and I was like, Bill Moseley, can he fucking sing? Can he do that? And so I was watching Repo, and his stuff is a little bit spoken, but he actually is in a band. Yeah. He's in a 3-man band with, I think, fucking Buckethead.
With Buckethead, that's right.
He's in a band with Buckethead?
Yes, he has a 3-man band with Buckethead.
You mean one of the best guitarists of all time?
It's fucking wild, dude. He has produced his own albums. Obviously his friggin' filmography goes on for days, all the way back to Endangered Species in '82. So he's been in everything. He's worked with everyone. He's musically inclined. He's released albums, and he's also worked with some bands and done some spoken word stuff in kind of like the vein of in House of 1,000. Had those vignettes where it was just him talking to the camera saying crazy shit. Yeah. He did the same thing on several people's albums. Like he'd go on their album, and it'd be like the track would open up, and he'd just be like saying some weird shit in the background because he's fucking Bill Moseley.
Because he's Bill fucking Moseley.
Because he's Bill fucking Moseley. That's why.
Yeah, I want to sing. I want to do a genetic opera. Yeah, fuck yeah. All right, Devil's Rejects. Let's do that too. Why not?
I feel like he just walks in the studio of a band. He's like, "I'm gonna speak on your fucking album." And they're just like, "Yes, sir."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. Look for him coming up. He's got a ton of stuff coming out. It looks like a lot of horror movies. It looks like he's gonna play a pretty big role in this new one called The Fourth Horseman. And then he's gonna do like a couple of monster movies. It looks like some zombie stuff, some demon stuff, some Frankenstein stuff.
He never makes a misstep. And I mean, what does that say about this guy, about Bill Moseley? How he does the movies he does, and makes the selections for the roles that he takes, and he still makes better movies than fucking Nick Cage. So, and Nicolas Cage has an Academy fucking award, okay? But I mean, it pretty much came out that Nick Cage is making the movie, this string of fucking movies he's making, because he's got a lot of debt he's got to pay off.
Oh yeah.
So that's why he's cranking out like every fucking movie he can. Funny or Die had a really funny spoof on that. Nick Cage accepting every film that comes down the pipe. So, but speaking of that, there was just to top it off, how much fans love Bill, is that there was when Devil's Rejects came out, there was actually a petition that was released. That I can't remember how many signatures it got, but it was a petition to get him nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Devil's Rejects. Like the horror community came together to try and force the Academy to nominate him. Yeah, wow. They loved him so much. So, and I don't know of another actor where the community that they entertain has come together to do that.
Especially not in horror. That doesn't happen very often.
Let's do a change.org and get Bill Moseley a fucking Oscar.
He deserves an Oscar.
That doesn't fucking happen. So, hats off to one of the character actors of many generations. I love him to death. Happy birthday, Bill.
Yeah, happy birthday, Bill.
Happy birthday, Bill. And that wraps up another episode of Week in Horror. We want to thank you all for listening. A quick congratulations to Mary Geske, if I pronounced it wrong, I'm sorry, who won our first t-shirt giveaway. Stay in touch with us on social media for future giveaways and contests. Week in Horror is a real passion project for us, and we really hope you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed making it. If you do, please subscribe to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or your favorite hosting site, and make sure you smash that notification button as we drop new episodes every Sunday. As always, any questions, comments, or feedback, we'll love to hear from you. And if you follow us on Facebook.com/weekinhorror, you can get your daily splatter, a bit of horror history every single day, because what's a day without a little horror? Thank you again so much for your support. I'm Eugene signing off.
I'm Alex.
And I'm JL.
And we'll see you next week.